Drew here, and I came into Slow Horses with a lot of anticipation. I was excited to see Gary Oldman playing the role of Jackson Lamb, and I like the cast in general. And I have to say, recently I tried to watch another Apple TV Plus thriller called Suspicion, which has a lot of similar elements to this one, and I just couldn't keep watching because it just wasn't that engaging. And I definitely am gonna finish this one, so it has that to recommend it. But I have to say, overall, by the end of the second episode, I felt a lot more sour on this than I expected to. I think the thing is, people keep comparing it to Le Carré, and Le Carré has this timeless quality. It has even the fact that these stories take place so far in the past. In Le Carré, they still have reverberations that echo to our present day. The themes of his stories are universal. And that's why I think every spy story to come out since The Spy Who Came In From the Cold has kind of been measured against the yardstick of that story. But in all honesty, I think that comparison does a disservice to this show, because this is a lot more of 24 than it is Le Carré. I would say there's a lot more of Jack Bauer in these characters than there is George Smiley. I understand the comparison, but I think it's not really the best one. The thing that this series reminds me of more than anything is a top-notch airport paperback. Like, that's about the level of the storytelling here. It's very, very intelligently written, and it has a lot of character development, good actors, good production values. It's worth your time to watch, but don't go in expecting too much. Don't expect something that's going to linger on your memory long afterwards. It's just a good, well-told yarn that you'll forget about in a month. Now, I have to say, if you don't find yourself overly impressed by the first two episodes, I recommend giving it a little time, because I think that this series, it underplays its greatest asset in the first two episodes. Instead of focusing on Gary Oldman's Jackson Lamb, it puts more of its focus on River Cartwright, who is a very, very conventional protagonist played by a very, very conventional actor in Jack Lowden. I feel like if they had put someone like Tom Hughes or someone else who had a little bit more of an edgy personality in the role, I feel that it would have gone a long way to making this more interesting. But from my perspective, this main character just feels a lot like other main characters that we've seen in spy fare without a lot to differentiate him. The thing about Homeland, I know people hated Carrie Mathison. A lot of people hated Carrie Mathison by the time that series was over. But the thing that really distinguished it from 24 was that the protagonist was so different than what you would expect. And I think that the problem with River Cartwright, this main character, is that he's exactly what you would expect. And the series will be better when it focuses more on peripheral characters. There are a lot of characters here, some of them more interesting than others. I have a particular fondness for Broderick Ho, this hacker who they mention noteworthily put someone on the sex offender list because he took his seat on the bus. I wish there was more of these side characters in the story instead of so much of River Cartwright. I know a lot of people probably like Jack Lowden. I like Jack Lowden. I just think that he's a very conventional actor in a very conventional role, which is kind of not the most interesting thing. We've seen a lot of this. Jackson Lamb, played by Gary Oldman, like I said, he doesn't do enough in the first two episodes. And I know where this story is going. I read the book, so I understand that this character, it has a bit of a slow burn in terms of what they do with him. But I feel they could have given the audience more hints of what to expect from this character in these first two episodes. Jackson Lamb, the comparison that comes to mind for me is he's kind of like, obviously he's like George Smiley, if George Smiley had no civility or dignity. He's constantly farting and just insulting everyone around him. He's kind of like the Ron Swanson of MI5 in that he sees everyone at his little outpost called Slough House. Everyone there is nicknamed Slow Horses, hence the show's title. He sees them as failures and he's trying to keep them from having any impact in the intelligence community because he doesn't trust them to get anything done.
People are happy to spend time in this building after 5 p.m. But I'm not really doing my job. At the end of the working day, your pitiful, miserable time is your own. But if I find out you are indulging in extracurricular activities that could upset the equilibrium of this blessed sanctuary, then I will make it so that you wish you were in a Siberian gulag.
And he takes the greatest pleasure in making them all miserable and in keeping them on unimportant, uninvolved tasks. So right from the get-go, you wonder how much of this character is actually who he is and how much is buried beneath the surface. There's only one person at Slough House he seems to care about, that's Catherine Standish. And I like the way that they're slowly revealing the backstory of these two characters, and they are using flashbacks to establish this shared history slowly over the course of this series. I feel like there's a couple of things in the book here that they're bringing to the front more quickly, which is good because they kind of felt like they came out of nowhere in the book, but here they're bringing them up earlier so that the audience isn't going to feel cheated. There's a lot of twists in this story. Some of them are very good, and I think that it is a very, very accurate depiction of spycraft for the most part. It's a lot more, the tradecraft on display is a lot more realistic with hot boxes and hacking and all the different elements at play. This series really does feel dated though. The book came out in 2008 and it feels like this show basically has 2008 politics, 2008 understanding of terrorism in its DNA. It would have been really, really hard to rewrite this story given how integral to the story those elements are, but it definitely, you would almost think that they should have made this series take place in 2008 just so that it would make more sense to viewers the way that characters are viewing the war on terror and other aspects. I think that as much as has changed, there is a lot here that still is relevant and interesting and relatable, but I think that a lot of it does seem kind of dated, and this is where the 24 comparison springs to mind for me. The main plot line is they're trying to rescue a young man who's been kidnapped by alt-right extremists who are planning to chop off his head to make a point about Muslim terrorists, and they have 72 hours to try and rescue this young man. And at first, Slough House has nothing to do with it. Why would they? They're not competent agents. They're the people that fell through the cracks that nobody wants to give any opportunities because they failed or ticked someone off in some way. So they're agents that aren't going to be on this case. But eventually, they get pulled into it, of course, and getting to see the underdogs take on even Regency Park, which is the agents, where the real agents are in this battle of wits and a race against time. It starts to become very, very interesting and kinetic by this series, and I think that if you stick it out, I don't think you'll regret watching this. But as I said, it's got a lot more 24 in its DNA than Le Carré. I don't think it has the universal themes that Le Carré managed to pull from. I think the reason the Le Carré comparison comes up is because so much of this story is about agents trying to cover their backsides and playing political games rather than trying to actually solve the problems they've been tasked with solving. You see a lot of this with Kristen Scott Thomas's character, who's kind of a draconic figure at the head of Regency Park, the real agency. And there's a lot at play with her character that is going to ultimately pit her against Jackson Lamb in this battle of wits, and that's when you're going to realize there's more to him than meets the eye, and that's when the story really takes off. But in these first two episodes, you're only getting glimmers of that. I think otherwise this episode, I think the most interesting character is Olivia Cooke's Sid Parker. I really enjoy her dynamic with River. Even though River, I find him to be, as I said, a conventional protagonist, I really enjoy the interplay and the banter between these two characters, as you see them both as competent individuals stuck at a dead-end job, basically, and recognizing that in each other and having this kind of mutual connection, as they're both people that really want to make a difference, that really want to cut through the red tape and actually save lives. The circumstances under which River ended up at Slough House are established in the first 5 minutes of the first episode, and this is one of the more riveting sequences of the show. A very, very taut, well-directed sequence of, of trying to stop a would-be bomber, apparently. And this sequence is really well shot and engaging, and there's going to be more of that if you're interested to know. But in the first 2 episodes, it's really establishing the setting, establishing the characters, and slowly establishing the inciting incident that's going to bring these characters into play. So this is a slow burn. If you're interested in this type of series, I would give it a shot for sure. I think you'll enjoy it. Just don't expect it to be more than an airport paperback thriller. That's about the level of this. I think it's very, very witty. There's a lot of great banter and dialogue and humor and characterization, but it's not like the spy story of our times, as many have called it, I don't think. I think it's, a taut thriller, but not a lot more than that. So those are my thoughts for what they are worth. If you're interested in seeing my upcoming reviews of Slow Horses and other shows, please consider subscribing to the channel. And as always, thanks for watching.